South African consumers facing pain at both the pumps and the local grocery stores this month. A steep rise in fuel prices has motorists once again paying more than 20 rand a litre, at least that's in inland provinces. While the overall food price basket has increased by almost 9% year on year, and that's according to the Household Affordability Index. Let's unpack what underpins all of this now, bring in our guests. Joining us now is Agri SA Executive Director Christo Van der Rheede. Also for this conversation is spokesperson for the Automobile Association Layton Beard. To both our guests, thanks very much indeed for your time. Great to have you on the AM report. Layton, I wonder if I can begin with you. I'm taken back to a statement that your organization released a while ago, calling for an urgent review of the petrol price, essentially, which is interesting because I've always thought of the petrol price being something that South Africa has to accept because of external issues, which in many instances are beyond our control.
Certainly, there are many external issues beyond our control that do influence the fuel price. International geopolitical developments, what's happening in the Ukraine, for instance, will have an impact on the oil price, and that will have an impact on the price we pay locally. So there's no way around that. I think from our point of view, there are many elements on that fuel price that are within our control. There are elements on there in terms of storage, in terms of levies, in terms of margins that we think need to be reviewed. We're not saying that they are currently incorrect. All we're saying is let's have a look at their appropriateness and whether they still need to belong on the fuel price, A, and B, if they do need to belong there, whether they're calculated correctly, and if there's any way we can mitigate against rising costs by dealing with them better. So that's the reason we're calling for the review. And certainly, I think, not only will it, make a determination on whether things need to be on that fuel price or not, at the end of the day, we think it will give confidence to consumers that the fuel price that they have is one that has been thoroughly checked and audited, and they can have confidence that it's correct. Outside
of the prices themselves being sky high, do we have reason to believe that there are levies there that perhaps shouldn't be there?
That's a very difficult question to answer. Whether they should be there or not is a moot point. The fact is that they are there. And if you look at, for instance, the general fuel levy, which is a levy that's been discussed quite a lot, and a lot of people saying, well, let's just take it off the fuel price. Well, it's not as simple as that. If you take that off the fuel price, you've got to generate that income somewhere else. It's one of the fourth largest tax that government has at the moment, and it's a very easy tax for them to collect. So it's a really good source of income for government, and they're not simply going to say, well, we don't want it, and we're going to take it away. There has to be an alternative, and what that alternative is, I think, is very difficult to determine. So for us, it's a question of understanding those levies from a consumer point of view, and whether there's any wiggle room within those levies that can mitigate against these rising costs.
Yeah, Christo, let's bring you into the discussion. Of course, the concern always is that with an increase in the petrol price, there's going to be a domino effect, and eventually that's going to hit people in the grocery store, an increase in food prices. However, the complexity doesn't end there. My understanding is that those in the tomato industry are facing more challenges in the form of pests and, of course, devastation caused by the heavy rains that we saw in the weeks gone by.
Good morning to you and all of the viewers. And before I want to answer that question, let me just link up to what Layton has said. It's one thing to pay all of these levies, but what are these levies used for? We see in practice that our roads are in a terrible condition. Farmers themselves struggle to get their products from the farms to markets and to the retailers, and that in itself is a very big challenge. You spend a lot of money on repairing your trucks, on repairing your vehicles that you use, your farm implementation, and that for us is unacceptable. We've also learned that some of these levies obviously are used to sponsor the Road Traffic Management Authority, and the big question is, what are these people doing in terms of maintaining law and order on our roads? We've seen killings, unnecessary killings, people driving in a way that really it's absolutely irresponsible, but there's no proper law and order being maintained on the roads. And at the same time, if you go into certain areas, the potholes are really treacherous because you and your family are not safe on those roads when you travel. So that's one issue that we need to deal with in this country. The second issue that I want to come to, that links up to your question, relates to this upward trend in commodity prices. Tomatoes, potatoes, all of our vegetables, our meat prices are on the increase. And as farmers, we are very worried about it because farmers are price takers. We don't see the benefit of that. But at the end of the day, we have to make ends meet. We've seen a massive spike in the price of fertilizer, herbicides, pesticides. There's also this new proposal by Eskom to have a 20.6% increase in electricity tariffs. And then on top of it, most probably a spike in the labor costs as well. And these input costs really makes it very difficult for farmers to produce food profitably. But it's not the farmers that are guilty of the steep increase in the prices of food. It's further down the value chain that all of these costs are added, and at the end of the day, the consumer must then bear the burden of higher costs for products.
Really sobering, that last sentiment you've shared there, Christo, because we're only in February. Layton, is it still early to tell whether this is a sign of the year ahead?
That's a difficult one, and I do also I want to thank Christo for adding to what I said about the costs and the levies. Just one point on that, when you talk about the Road Traffic Management Corporation, who had a surplus of 262 million in their 2020 financial year, you do have to question, what that agency is doing in terms of promoting road safety in the country. But be that as it may, the trend going forward is very difficult to determine. As I said, there's international political events, the Ukraine, Russia's gas outputs. We're looking at, the return to work of many millions of people in Europe because the trajectory of Omicron wasn't as severe as initially thought. That's going to have an impact on gas and oil usage. So there's many different developments that will impact on the fuel price. And it's near impossible to say whether it's going to go up or down in March. I think for us at the moment, it's a very sensitive. It's at a very sensitive pricing point. And I just want to add to what Christo said. I think, farmers, unfortunately, are at the mercy of the fuel price, and they have input costs that they have to cover. And, at the end of the day, consumers are the ones that feel the brunt because, these costs have to be covered. There's no way around that. So whether this is going to continue or not, I think we'll have to wait and see what the numbers give us on a daily basis.
Absolutely. One can only hope for good news in the months ahead. For now, let me thank you both for your time. Really do appreciate it. Layton Beard is a spokesperson for the Automobile Association. Also joining us there is Christo Van der Rheede, who's the Executive Director of Agri SA. To both of you once again, thanks very much indeed.